Hello, hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Hope that everybody is doing well today. Sam Jenks here, CRO at Kodiak Hub, also SRM expert and focusing on, of course, helping you guys understand today how SRM software can be able to complement your ERP. We have just come up to time here, and I know that some people are starting to come into the session, but I'm sure that others are going to join very soon. And we had about 100 registrants, so we're going to wait a moment for people to be able to come into the session as well before we get into the day's content. So let's give 1 second for people to be able to start filing in, as a lot of people have back-to-back meetings nowadays, not even time to be able to grab a cup of coffee. It's a shame. The day's session is being recorded, so you will absolutely be distributed the recording following the session. Additionally, if you have any questions, you see in the chat line already that you can be able to add those questions in, and feel free to be able to do so during the session. It's not going to disturb me in any way, shape, or form. It's best, in fact, that you mark down those particular questions. Our team will mark those questions and then we'll come back to them during the Q&A as well. So no need to get those questions answered in the chat line themselves. We're going to answer them live at the end of the session for everybody. Also, make sure to keep your voting fingers ready so that you guys will be able to answer any of the polls. Like I said, we had over 100 registrants, and I see about 20 or so people in the session right now, probably expecting around 40 to 50 people. So we'll see, we'll wait just a moment more. But in the meantime, it'd be great if everybody can be able to quickly just input, which is heating up the chat. Where are you calling in from? And I'll start it off. I'm calling in myself from Boston, Massachusetts, looking out at Boston Common here as well. Very beautiful, cold, crisp day here in Boston. I just relocated myself from Stockholm, and to my surprise, it is equally as cold here in Boston. Awesome. Carrie from Zurich, Simon from Liverpool, Carolina from Poland, Priyanka from India, Richard from London, Netherlands, Birmingham. Let's see, Lithuania, Newcastle, Brighton, Edinburgh, Bristol. Very exciting. Nice. A mix here, but a very UK heavy crowd. So it's very nice to be able to have you guys here, and looking forward to be able to get into things as well with everybody during today's session. We want to be able to just cover off the agenda for today. We will then pop up this. Richard, if you don't mind just taking away the bottom bar here while we go through the agenda, I think that's everybody's all good with that. Appreciate that. So today's agenda, we're going to take a quick glance at Kodiak. We're also going to talk a little bit about the kind of status, or how would I say, the state of the union when it comes to procurement, and the focus that I believe also that procurement needs to be able to have on creating an operating system for their teams. And SRM is the opportunity to be that operating system as well. We're also going to look side by side, ERP and SRM. It's not really versus, right? It's ERP and SRM, and it's what makes them different, what makes them similar, right? Where do they have overlaps? Where do they have differences? How does SRM fit into that architecture of ERP, and vice versa? And then we're also going to talk a little bit about a decision-making matrix. A lot of companies are focused on how they can be able to repurpose elements of their ERP and Excel spreadsheets and homegrown solutions and the like to be able to purpose as an SRM. And with that being said, I think that we've recognized throughout time that that's not always getting the job done. So we're going to talk a little bit about, well, when is that enough, right? Versus when is it maybe time that a business, like yours is actually looking at an SRM? Because absolutely ERP, homegrown solutions in tandem can be enough. But I think that a business gets to a particular scale and or has particular attributes where it's not enough. And then we're going to finish off with a live demo of Kodiak, just a really high level, 5-minute demonstration. There will be the opportunity to be able to book some time with our team if you're interested in a deeper demonstration. I saw as well that there was a question if we get the slide deck after the meeting. Yes, you will be able to have the opportunity to download the slides. And again, the session is being recorded, so you also get a recording if you'd like to be able to cozy up with a cup of tea over the weekend and watch this back. My guess is that not many people are going to be doing that, but with that being said, you will be distributed the content nonetheless. So let's get into the session today. First, starting with Kodiak at a glance. Kodiak Hub, SRM provider, suite provider with a Scandinavian I would say Scandinavian at heart, but a global mindset. We have customers across the globe, over 100 different customers, and 14 different nationalities within our team. We've received plenty of accolades. I don't need to talk about them. If you'd like to hear about our solution, it's best to go out in the market, look at us on ProcureTech, look at us on Spend Matters, look what people are saying about us in Capterra and the like. That's, of course, what our customers view and analysts and the market view is of Kodiak. I think that I always urge that you look into some of those resources if you are right now in the place that you are evaluating solutions. When it comes to our solution itself, it is a modular one. On screen here, you see a little bit about the different capabilities that our solution provides. The hub being the baseline capabilities. This is your operating system. It is your single source of truth for information, data, and documentation. This is the piece of the solution that is often integrated deeply with an ERP solution to be able to ensure that there is a golden record either in our solution or in the ERP. This is, of course, also where you're able to have a lot of updates of supplier information and then, of course, keep the most recent records up to date in your ERP or vice versa. This is also then where there is the opportunity to build out workflows and have collaboration between yourself and vendors, as well as then internal workflows and collaboration as well. The modules to the left and the right, these pillars are focused on, as you see on the left, risk screening. There we have third-party risk management capabilities natively integrated into our solution and licensed via us. Whereas then on the right-hand side of the screen, the solution is very focused on process excellence and automation, everything from the start of the relationship, registration and intake, through to onboarding and assessment, audits, and performance evaluation. Of course, providing a really 360-degree view, integrated risk management, compliance, ESG, qualification, quality, and performance under the same hood as a solution that has an operating system for information management and collaboration. That's Kodiak's capabilities in a nutshell. We work with some awesome world-class procurement teams, and we, of course, are just one part of that puzzle. It's awesome, people, when it's all said and done, world-class procurement teams that are utilizing our solution to guide excellent process, with the backbone of good technology. And for us, of course, we are nothing without our customers, so we appreciate their trust. I think that we have a few customers in attendance today, and thank you guys for attending as well. Now, with that being said, I wanted to be able to launch actually the first poll of today, just to understand where everybody is at the moment. And let's add this to the stream. I'm curious of understanding where is everybody in your current journey related to SRM, as well as that SRM technology, just so that we have an understanding of kind of who's in attendance. Are you currently very mature, meaning you've already adopted something? Are you in a position that you are in a selecting kind of phase, right? Are you currently looking for an SRM system out there on the market? Are you just educating yourself, right? You're building that momentum internally. You guys understand that maybe there's a problem somewhere that you could fix with some technology or a program for SRM, but you're trying to get other people rallied around it? Or are you just first now gaining your understanding of things here? All right, it looks like we've had about half of the attendees voting here. Just a second more, if you don't mind. Take a moment to be able to fill out the poll, just again, so we can understand what the kind of level of maturity is of all the attendees, so we can speak to everybody during the session. Great, all right. Seems as if there is about, let's see here. Yeah, 70-30 split when it comes down to it. 70% of people are kind of earlier stage in awareness or education, building momentum internally, gaining an understanding of the SRM market, as well as then technology in the market, whereas then about 30% of attendees have already adopted something or are actively looking and selecting something. So I think that those that are early stage, you're in the right place to understand, well, what is the capabilities of an SRM platform? How does it differentiate from an ERP? And how is it, of course, helping to be able to extract the excellent parts of the ERP in tandem and help our team as an operating system and automation layer to be able to be great. And of course, for those that are in a selection phase, maybe some opportunities to be able to understand more about the architecture if you aren't currently integrated or getting value out of your ERP and the SRM in tandem as well. We're going to stop that poll then and remove it from the stream. And let's get into the day's content. I want to talk a little bit about the State of the Union. And I want to start by saying, like I do with many of my presentations, congrats. Now more than ever before, procurement as a function is on the tips of the C-suite's tongue, right? This is fantastic. And it did take a global pandemic, resource shortages, boats clogging up canals, geopolitical strife, trade wars. It took all those bad things, and it's a VUCA market, but a VUCA market means that procurement and sourcing, supply chain roles are more business critical than ever before. Unfortunately, though, you guys still are not armed with that operating system and tools to be able to manage your day-to-day. The majority of procurement teams, as you see on the statistics on screen, are still managing their suppliers and their supplier relationships, meaning risk, compliance, quality, performance, and collaboration with a mix of an ERP and Excel or various homegrown solutions. This is just not good enough anymore. I'll tell you why. There is a vast number of procurement professionals that say that they have low or very low visibility into their real-time procurement activities. So things happen in the business. They are probably actually being processed in the ERP solution, right? So the data and the opportunity for insight is there, but the surfacing of that insight in the day-to-day, the integrated work and the lifecycle management of the procurement function, those insights are actually never being realized. And this is a real problem. Why? Because the jobs that are piling up on your desk are growing. It used to be, right, create some savings, manage risk. And of course, everybody involves procurement way too late in the create savings piece. I mean, creating savings is typically an opportunity of, managing the process. Reducing Maverick spend is not about, going out and beating those stakeholders over the head. It's about changing the process of requisition and requests and intake, right? With that being said, your jobs are growing. It's not just savings and risk anymore. There is an expectation on procurement that you will find a resilient supplier at the best price, at the highest quality, a top performer, a collaborative supplier, right? There's this focus on total cost of ownership that requires so much of the procurement, sourcing, and supply chain function. And the jobs to be done is growing, right? We see this from the statistic from Hackett. The jobs to be done have grown with 10%. With that being said, FTE, only 1%. That creates a massive productivity gap. What does it mean? You guys need to be able to A, get budget for more heads, or get budget for technology. The fact is, with lacking visibility, you guys, of course, are going to have a very tough time to be able to close this gap. With a lacking operating system to automate day-to-day low-value tasks, it is going to be very difficult to close this gap. And I want to be very clear. When we talk about ERP and we talk about SRM, the enterprise resource planning, a solution that is focused on enterprise resource planning, is a data foundation, and it should be for your business. This is not an operating system, however, right? To be very clear, the ERP should not be your go-to interfaces to be able to operate on a day-to-day basis. Why? Because the primary objectives change quite significantly here, okay? Let's see these two side by side. The ERP is your transactional engine, right? This should be the focus for your business when it comes to the ERP. This is where you have your POs, your receipts, your invoices, your transactional master data, financial controls, spend ledgers, and alike, right? Whereas the SRM, this is where you have your onboarding flows. This is where you have your risk and compliance capabilities. This is where you have your performance and quality management, your corrective action plans, and alike. This is the opportunity, of course, to have that assurance or operating system layer on top of the ERP. Now, with this being said, these two solutions need to live in tandem. They need to live in parallel as well. This is a format that I took inspiration from our friends at Archlet. It's an excellent model, I believe, and we've spun it up a little bit with a Kodiak flair. This is the modern architecture of source to pay. ERP lives as a backbone, right? Whereas source to pay, typically either a single source to pay solution is selected, or for example, there is a best of breed approach, right? Those are kind of the two widely accepted ways to be able to work with source to pay. Equal to that lifecycle approach is the SRM and the third-party risk management approach. Now, the interesting thing is that SRM, we all know, right? It was born out of the focus of Peter Kraljic and the matrix of segmentation. You know, segment your vendors in one of the 4 quadrants, and that's how you're going to manage them within that particular segmentation, right? What we believe is that SRM as a program, and particularly as the technology that can be provided to manage those programs, has shifted dramatically, right? SRM is not anymore just a snapshot in time. It is a life cycle approach. Third-party risk management is not something that you do upfront and then forget about. It is a life cycle approach. Integrated risk management is important, right? Performance is not something that you only do after the fact. Performance and quality measures with your vendor base is there to be able to improve upon things over time, right? It is a life cycle and loop, right? A flywheel, if you have it, right? A focus on planning, doing, checking, and then also acting. That is the focus of SRM. And any good SRM, any great SRM, is also then integrated deeply with the ERP solution. Understanding that the master needs to live somewhere, the SRM offers opportunities for data input from external data sources, whether that be third parties, or whether that be, for example, different types of inputs from vendors or users. The SRM is crucial to be able to be linked up with the ERP. Now, this is the end state, right? It is absolutely not going to be the case in every single business that you have an architecture that allows for this. And we'll get around to that in a moment. But this is what an SRM ecosystem typically looks like, right? When Kodiak is at the center, which for us, Kodiak is at the center, we understand that our customers, our customers, architectures, this is not always the case. Now, with that being said, if we sit at the center, this is typically what an architecture looks like. An ERP typically has a push and pull integration and, or for example, a data lake. And we'll come back to the differentiation and when a data lake is required and or preferred as a middle layer to the ERP, right? There's also a push and pull of data in dynamic portals between suppliers and also internal stakeholders to capture experience or collaborate in different ways, right? So the SRM is the bridge between that qualitative input, whereas then the SRM can also be the bridge and or the visualization to integrate third-party risk management, and therefore also, should flags occur or things of that sort from data of external parties, either that being third-party risk data or supplier and internal stakeholder data, well then of course that data can be pushed back into the ERP. For example, to flag a vendor to make sure that we're not working with them or like, right? These are the primary data sources that foundationally shift the focus away from just data management to insights, right? And this is, I would say, where one of the primary differentiators of SRM and the ERP solution lie, but also why it's important that there is interconnectivity, because it complements it. With an SRM that is hooked up to these various data sources, as well as then back to a data lake or the ERP, one can surface insights, real-time insights, various insights. This is the culmination of those insights, which I think is best seen in our platform and most SRMs within a scorecarding capability. And the scorecards that our solution is able to build are robust and they are 360 and they are focused on helping to surface various insights everything from risk to compliance to ESG to performance, and also giving the tools to be able to drive forward the relationship. Now, we recognize that this is not always possible. Why? Well, let me give you an example case here, okay? This is the example case of generic company ABC, okay? They're a manufacturing or energy business. They are at about 1.5 billion in revenue. They're 10,000 employees. They have about 50 people within their procurement organization. They have various global sites, and those various global sites, there's a few that have matching instances of their ERP, but the majority of them are actually running on various ERPs. And it's a mix of different types of ERPs. Some people have S4HANA, some people have the most recent version of Infor. One of the sites maybe has some legacy Oracle. Somebody's maybe moved to NetSuite, right? It's mixed. In these cases, we want to be very distinct. SRM is best serving a company that has this particular architecture when SRM lives in tandem to a data lake. Now, I want to talk about this for a second, right? Because I think that there is a potential misconception that the SRM is the consolidation and normalization layer. Now, the SRM is the consolidation layer. With that being said, the SRM should not be your normalization layer, okay? So if we look at this particular complex data architecture, on the left-hand side of the screen, we would see the business that has multiple ERPs, right? And in those different ERPs, from those different BUs, there will be different instances of POs and vendor master data. The names and IDs will be different. The way that things are tracked will be different, right? The currencies may be different. In these cases, it is good to have a match between your transactional layer with a normalization layer, an API that is pushing and pulling data between your data lake, for example, and those multiple ERPs. And the data lake then is the opportunity to normalize the data that you have, right? To be able to, of course, also create controls for creating golden records. In those cases, that normalization layer fits very well to push and pull data between the SRM. The SRM being then the automation layer on various operational, tactical, and strategic tasks within this vendor lifecycle management, pushing and pulling data between, for example, again, those third-party risk insights, but also the collaboration and input layer, which is then the dynamic portals, such as your vendors' input, as well as then internal stakeholder input as well. Now, I want to be clear again. SRM is not the normalization layer. It can be the consolidation layer, right? But in complex data architectures, it is important that we do not kid ourselves, that we also look towards opportunities such as Databricks, Snowflake, Azure, AWS. All of these big players, they have services to support in normalization. The SRM is never going to do that alone, right? With that being said, the SRM is still required in this particular architecture as a driving force for automation and the operational system, of course, to bring back proprietary data, qualitative feedback, and also then third-party insights. So how do we know? How do we know if we're ready for an SRM? Or when is maybe just the ERP and the Excel, when is that good enough, right? It could be the case. We've put together a decision-making matrix that makes this very simple for those that are interested in understanding, does my business have maturity to be able to understand, well, is it a fit? So this is our decision-making matrix. And it's based upon, as you see on the left-hand side of the screen here, various decision attributes. The attributes are primarily focused on not your business, but more so your supplier base, right? Or your requirements within your supplier base based upon the industry that you're within or the scale of your organization. Risk profile, things like audit or compliance pressure, things like also maybe the maturity in your business, right? We think that this is an exercise that you could be able to walk through with your teams. And of course, like we've mentioned, the slides will be distributed for everybody. that can give you an overview of the decision making at foot, right? And there is some scoring that you can be able to do, low, mid, high requirements on needing SRM. If you meet 5 or more of these particular attributes, it might be something that would benefit your organization and that would deliver significant ROI on top of your ERP to be able to manage the life cycle of vendors. What we've also done is we've provided a quick checkbox exercise so that you can be able to also run through some of the top level requirements, right? If you were to check 3 or more of these, then the ERP in tandem to the SRM has the opportunity to deliver measurable ROI to your business. With that being said, we will now transition over to a live demo. I'll pause for a second to make sure that if anybody has questions about the content that was just presented, that they're going to be able to drop those into the public chat while I transition over my screen. Alrighty. I'm going to not make this mistake that I've made before. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. Richard, if you don't mind making sure that let's see here. Let me take this off of stream. Correct. Boom. And then I will add this onto the stream as well. Now, Richard, do you mind just giving me a thumbs up that we are online with the great, amazing. Great. Thanks everybody for sitting through the first portion. I hope that there was some value in that. I think that the assets with those decision making matrices, as well as then some of the models that we provided, can give some inspiration to those of you guys that are earlier stage, but it can also help, of course, if you're in a selection period, phase right now, to have those conversations internally about architecture, right? And again, the majority of our customers, they have ERP integrations. I want to be clear, the majority of them also don't start with them from day one, right? Why? Is because it becomes this big bang. It becomes the barrier to entry, and that's the last thing that you want it to be. You want these things to be working in tandem to make sure that you have a good feed of master data, that your master data is being able to be kept up to date by the data that is being impacted in the SRM, being fed back into the ERP, that the ERP data is able to feed into the SRM to share, for example, performance metrics and alike, right? These are crucial elements, but with that being said, the ERP integration itself or a data lake integration should not become a barrier to entry of utilizing, of course, an SRM. And for our customers that get up and running, it typically is almost always something that happens about 3 to 6 months into the initial project. Why? Is because then you start understanding, well, what is the supplier data that I actually need to be able to manage and alike. Speaking of supplier data, we're going to get into some of the capabilities of the solution here. With that being said, I'm going to stay very high level and focus primarily on our capabilities for building insights of a supplier 360 in the scorecard. But I wanted to give a quick orientation for those of you that are not familiar with our platform. The solution is broken down into 3 main pillars. Insights. This is where you can have 3 different data scopes, which are related back to suppliers, products and services, and POs. Meaning, of course, that you can manage the information, data, and documentation of all of these 3 areas or data scopes. And then, of course, you can be able to dive deeper into them as well. The operating system, but also something that is deeply typically linked with the ERP solution to be able to ensure, for example, that POs are visible in Kodiak, and or, for example, product information is visible in Kodiak, whereas Kodiak can be utilized to do things like capture product documentation for elements of compliance and alike. That's the differentiation, again, between the data layer, right, which is the transactional or data layer of the ERP, and the automation or assurance and operating system layer, which is then the SRM. Impact. Now, this is where the primary, I would say, again, delineation or the complement of SRM feeding back to the ERP, right? This is where you're able to impact the relationship, build up those assessments, audits, and performance evaluations. We have a template builder and an automated campaign capability, so you can be able to roll these out at mass, and the solution hunts down the supplier for you. They can be able to enter into those interfaces. And of course, then upon response, that's what's feeding into a lot of the scoring as well. All that KPIs and metrics can be defined by customers. We also then have an action and collaboration space as well. So you can trigger, of course, automatic corrective actions, improvement proposals, or things of the sort. The last tab being intelligence. This is where you're able to report. You're able to, of course, dashboard and draw forward insights at a broader view of your supplier base, simply rather than just maybe a supplier in the format of the scorecard. What we're seeing here is the supplier list. Now, this supplier list typically is a mirror of a lot of vendor master data. That vendor master data, of course, is more extensive than these different types of fields that you're seeing here. These fields can be managed by our customers to pull forward the data that they see fit to make sure that this view is relevant and purposeful for the user, right? And with that being said, can be also saved based upon the applied filters. So a category manager walks in, well, of course, they're going to be able to see their world every time that they open up this particular solution. But it can also be utilized to make sure that we always see an approved vendor list, for example, and should a vendor fall out of approval, that they won't be in that approved vendor list, or that we can be able to see only strategic or segmented suppliers of a higher spend classification. There's various capabilities and use cases, right? But this is all about visibility into the vendor base and into the vendor data. Whereas again, the operating system of being able to do things like quick classifications or searches. So let's find our strategic or leverage vendors that, for example, only have green or orange flags that, for example, I don't know, have a spend classification of A, B, or C, right? We apply that particular filter, and boom, we get up then that filtered list, which then we would be able to save as a brand new filter of vendors as we see fit. We could be able to do any type of quick views and comparisons as we would like. And again, this is the flexibility of having the SRM as the operating system. Anytime that we ask the vendor in self-assessments, or for example, in the action space to update data or documentation, well, of course, that's going to feed back into this particular vendor's profile as well. Now, let's search an individual vendor and pop into their scorecard. And this scorecard is, again, this is helping that 47% of businesses that feel like they have low or no visibility into their real-time procurement, data. This is helping to remedy that. How? Well, this is the 360. This is a customer's cockpit, right, for managing a vendor. This is a category manager's control center to be able to have all data, all documentation, all of the communication and collaboration, including ongoing and archived corrective actions. It's where you have third-party risk, financials, sanctions, media, and different types of elements related back to reputational risk in one place. It's where you have the country risk, the performance of this vendor, as well as then their operational risk or compliance and ESG factors as well. All in one interface, ready to be able to manage an individual vendor. Now, I'm going to walk through just a few simple capabilities here and also talk about, well, how does the ERP integrated with the SRM or vice versa impact the value of the SRM, right? Now, of course, data, right? We see the vendor master here, right? This is then something that can push and pull between the ERP and the SRM. And it's, of course, just something that needs to be determined. Well, when a data field is updated, let's say, for example, that the approval status of this particular vendor is updated, right, in some way, shape, or form, whether that be the top level approval or somebody individual approval level, will that then push back into the ERP? And if it does push back into the ERP, would it then take them off of a list to be able to be an approved vendor to buy from, right? These are the types of decisions that are made of pretty much where does the overriding record sit? Is it going to push? Is it going to pull? Is it going to push and pull? That differs based upon the use case of our customers, right? But this, of course, is one of the key elements. What are some of the other areas where data input is important? Well, of course, Different types of third-party risk insights. Let's say that a supplier has a bad financial result. Well, of course, you can get notified in Kodiak, but do you want that to flag then, for example, back in your ERP system? Maybe so. If there's something, for example, like a new sanction that's happened on a business, right? Let's say that, for example, there is a brand new entity underneath this particular organization, or a brand new special interest person or politically exposed person, for example, that pops up, right? And it's a real issue. Well, then maybe we want that data and information again to be able to stop from purchasing with a particular vendor as well. This is then giving, again, integrated third-party risk management rather than having it separate within a particular solution to the overall view of your vendor's life cycle, right? Where are some of the other aspects? Well, I would say that the biggest one is in performance. Data feeding in of quantitative data from your ERP or data lake provides the opportunity to be able to quantify at the top level related to your thresholds for good and bad. Let's take an example. What we see here is 6 different areas of performance. Now, underneath each of these individual areas of performance, our customers are able to determine, well, what are, in fact, the sub-criteria, right? Now, I don't have an ERP integration in this demo environment, but what I do have is examples of numerical values that are inputs into the SRM, right? And in this case, they're input by multiple stakeholders, which is then aggregating to a top level value, which then aggregates up again to the overall score in that area, and then the overall score of performance as a whole. Now, if these hard data points are then feeding into the thresholds that have been set, or the ranges that have been set, matched against a scoring, then at the top level, you're able to visualize very quickly and very clean where a supplier is doing well, or maybe where they're doing poorly. You can also be able to dive individually into these areas and determine, okay, is the supplier getting better or getting worse over time? Is their performance dipping? Well, then, of course, that's something that can be able to trigger notifications to the business in the SRM, but it can also be able to directly trigger actions to the suppliers for improvement, right? Corrective actions, improvement proposals, requests for more information, so forth and so on. It can also be able to show opportunities. Maybe a vendor is performing really great. Well, that's an opportunity for growth, right? For innovation and alike. And I would say that this is, again, where the operating system of the SRM comes into play, right? Data and documentation, right, is not just, for example, data fields like, yes, of course, this supplier has the ISO, right? And you have to dive and dig for it in an interface that is not user-friendly. Documentation is seen, found, and easy to be able to locate, whether that be, for example, contracts or ISO documentation and alike. Anything that's shared by the vendor with you, right, can be able to be visualized. Anything that you want to upload can also be visualized here. Expiry dates can be able to trigger automatic requests or notifications. It takes away the manual work of having to hunt down related back to compliance management. Additionally, the actions. Now, we mentioned it before, the capabilities of collaborating and creating workflows, right? This is the real value of course, having some type of a operating system layer over top of your ERP. Why? Because you can be able to take action directly with the vendors in your supply chain. Apologies, that's a bad action example. Let's go into another one that's maybe working here. This then gives you an opportunity to communicate, collaborate. You can be able to share comments back and forth. You can request documentation back and forth. This gives you the opportunity to manage a process of approval back and forth, right? Whether that be in the onboarding of a vendor or, for example, in the ongoing lifecycle management. This, again, gives you the operating system, but also the oversight into what's going on in your supplier base in a way that otherwise is not going to be, kind of the same foresight that you can have by only utilizing your ERP. And again, individual instances that might be, for example, disparate across different business units, across different individuals in their Excel spreadsheets or homegrown solutions. One solution, one-stop shop, one operating system, giving your team that assurance and automation layer that is necessary to be able to have in tandem with the transactional data layer of the ERP. With that being said, that concludes the demo portion of today. We'll take this off stream. And I will go out with a very simple CTA based upon what you've seen today. Would you like to book a demo? Boom, click on the button that's on the screen now. You can be able to go ahead and see a demonstration and speak with one of our SRM experts that will help to understand more about your particular case, help to understand, is it, of course, of interest, or do you fit within that matrix, of course, right, of a type of business that should have an SRM? And our team will be happy to help you to get to the bottom of that. Additionally, if you'd like to be able to download the slides, there is the opportunity to do so now. And in the meantime, I'm going to transition over to the question and answer portion of today as well. I see that there's a few different questions that have been marked here in the thread. Super. Richard, have you marked all of the questions here? Yes, I assume so. Great. All right. First question then from Priyanka. Let's take away this call to action here as well. Great. Priyanka's question, Kodiak has risk compliance, ESG risk assessment available when the application has integrated check or is only API integration from customers. Right, okay. So our solution offers the capability simply there's a longer part of the question. Yeah, so if it only API integration from the customer's external risk sustainability assessment tool. No, so our solution has the capability itself to be able to not only have third-party providers. So we've teamed up with different solutions: Mode Finance for sanctions and PEP, Credit Safe or Mode Finance for credit ratings, Webs.io for media screening and reputational risk, as well as then also 40 different internationally recognized indices. That's actually a proprietary risk profile that we've built up of different countries. That's based upon like indices from the ILO, World Bank, Fitch Ratings, UN, and many others. And that's where the first snapshot of third-party risk management is. Now, we do also have a bring your own license methodology, and we have out-of-the-box plugins, for example, with businesses such as Moody's, EcoVadis, Dun & Bradstreet, and many others as well. So that gives our customers the opportunity to also plug in their particular solutions if the solutions that they have today are maybe I would say conflicting with those that we also have partnered up with in our third-party risk. We're not, for example, a third-party risk solution. We are an SRM solution, and we are focused on integrating third-party risk management. And I think that that's, of course, the big distinction there as well. And that's also why we have a bring your own license methodology, so that we can be able to make sure that we are providing the opportunity to surface insights in a 360, even if a customer doesn't want our particular capability. So great question as well. Last question then here in the thread, is there customization of management that can be managed by a customer team? Yes, absolutely, and trained by admin. Absolutely, we urge that is the case within every project team as well. Otherwise, of course, the solution, I would say that you got to put guardrails on things. And the most important thing is striking that balance, I would say, in our solution. And our founder talks a lot about this, between governance, right, and freedom or trust. And I think that our solution allows for that, right? You can build global templates or business unit specific templates, and then give that same autonomy to the business units to be able to roll out, which means you can work by standard frameworks, right? Global frameworks, but you can also then be able to give that autonomy to your teams and manage their day-to-day as they see fit. Great question. Let's go to the next question here from Sandra. There's actually two questions. I'm not sure if this is actually going to be able to be all on screen. No, it doesn't seem as it is. The first question was, is there as well the possibility to collaborate on different specification documents? There is. With that being said, we don't have any like live document management capabilities currently. With that being said, we do give the opportunity in the collaboration space to have different types of version control as possible, of course. And then there was another question. If the supplier is not yet your selected supplier, is it possible to share documents? Yes, absolutely. So that you can absolutely share documents as it would be like in an onboarding process or a qualification process if they're like in an RFQ. So you would just be able to manage that vendor as a, for example, non-approved, non-active vendor. And a lot of our customers do that to be able to vet vendors as well prior to sourcing with them or buying from them as well. Absolutely. Great question, Sandra. Damien, can the SRM have third-party data integrated? You work in the aerospace industry, and there's a third-party database known as Oasis that hosts compliant IA 9100 suppliers. Absolutely. So we've done bespoke integrations for customers, but like I just mentioned, this is seen kind of as like a bring your own license methodology. Again, if it's a database that we can be able to have access to, right, then of course you can integrate it in various ways, whether that's in the scorecards or, for example, in the broader database as a particular, for example, check mark that it is a compliant vendor, whatever that might be. There is opportunities to do so. Yes, absolutely. Great question. Good. Well, if there's no other questions in the thread, then I will one last time pop up the CTA that if you would like to be able to book a demo, feel free to be able to do so. And other than that, the only thing that I can be able to say is thank you so much for joining. I appreciate the attendance, the engagement during the session. Great questions as well. If you have any questions following up, you can find me over email. You can be able to request a demo from our team. There's no strings attached, but of course, our team would love to be able to hear from you. If you're currently, for example, getting educated about the market or selecting a solution, we would love to be able to have the opportunity to show you what we're able to do at Kodiak. And I hope that today's opportunities have broadened your horizons on what ERP can be able to do in tandem to an SRM and how the SRM can serve as an awesome operating layer on top of the ERP as well. Thank you so much for your day or for your attendance, and have a good rest of your day as well.